Welcome to the From My Stand podcast with Matt Hinkle. Whether you are an avid hunter, a novice, or someone interested in the sport, Matt has a unique perspective to share. Sit back, relax, and kick your boots up as Matt shares what he's seeing from his stand.
Hi friends, thanks for joining us today. I'm your host, Matt Hinkle. This is my hunting partner, Casey, and by now you know him pretty good. He's been on the show, on the channel a couple of times, and thanks for coming out again this time. So appreciate Casey doing this. So what we're going to do today is for this particular episode is we're just going to talk about setup and how to kind of get ready for an upcoming hunting season. This season 2, we're calling it the year in the life of a hunter. And so we're talking about, at every point in the year, what should you be doing? Back in February, I did 3 parts on scouting. We talked a lot about finding their security, finding their food, finding the travel routes that connect the two. And so, there's some stuff on this channel already about scouting, but I wanted to pick Casey's brain today about really whatever you want to talk about, but kind of like scouting, setup, things like that.
Okay.
Stand locations, blind locations, just really anything you want to talk about with it. So that's kind of what we're going to be looking at. Now, first of all, just give us your thoughts a little bit about property layout. Really anything you want to say about it.
Yeah,
I know you do food plots.
Yeah.
Not everybody does that, but I will say this. Casey and myself and then his dad were kind of a trio and hunt together on the same property. We're not in the business. We're not in the industry. We're not sponsored. We're not professional hunters.
If you want to sponsor us, I'd be a lot of money wrapped up in this stuff.
Yeah, not necessarily turning it down, but I mean, right now it's just not that way. And so when Casey talks about food plots, I don't want you to think, oh man, this is some big hotshot pro hunter that has an unlimited budget.
No.
What size is your food plot?
It's an acre. Right at an acre. Yeah.
I mean, to a normal person, I mean, it's going to be a sacrifice, but it's not totally unrealistic. So because I know what people think. They watch this and they say, well, they're big food plots and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
it's not like that. We're talking blue collar, normal hunters, really, is what I would call us.
But, go out on the weekends and, hunt the weekends and work.
Between work shifts. And so anyway, talk about property layout, though, for just a minute.
So I think the biggest thing is, you got to make sure you know your property because every single property is different. Some places that we hunt, it's just big thickets, big ridge tops. And then you can, if you're around like an agriculture place, like you can take food plots and throw them out the window because, there's bean fields, cornfields. That's what you need.
That's right.
I mean, that's,
I know a guy that he hunts in kind of upper Ohio where it's all flat. Yeah. It's all fields.
Yep.
And he tried to do corn piles. They don't even know the corn piles there.
They don't care. They might maybe late season.
He's feeding coons and squirrels.
That's all.
He's like, I put a huge corn pile out and there's never any deer.
Yeah.
That's because they got 1,000-acre corn piles.
Right. So they got all the grain and everything out in the fields already. But you got to find your food source. If you got acorns.
Yeah.
Any kind of natural like nut tree, whatever. A lot of the greenery, deer are eating, a lot of the greenery that's growing on these hillsides. You get some wild grapes, you usually find turkeys in that.
I read an article not too long ago. I don't know what you would think about this. It's bounced off of you, but they said that deer eat a lot more woody browse than we really realize.
Probably.
I mean, they said, people just totally pass that over, but, greenbriers and just that woody brow, hardy stuff sturdy stuff that you don't think of.
Yeah, because I mean, there's a lot of places in the country that's all there is.
Yeah,
that's all that's so
don't
can eat.
Forget about that. If you got nuts or agriculture or certainly fruit, they love fruit, but that's harder to come by.
Yeah, I think a lot of things you see on guys. They'll watch one thing on TV and say, "Oh, I need to get my property like this," and it's deer are different in different parts of the country, in my opinion. But I think, you need to just learn biggest thing's learning your property. What natural food do you have growing on there? What are the hillside layouts look like? It depends on how big your property is. You might have 5 acres, you might have 500 acres. It just depends. But if you do have a big tract of land, it's hard to cover all of it, and it all looks different in different seasons of the year too. So your best bet is getting out there after winter, or at the end of winter after the season, walking every inch of it, just to see these little layouts you've got. Because you'll find some different things that you never, natural water holes. You'll find those.
Yeah.
That's another one. You might just think it's just a flooded spot for a little bit, but it could be a natural spring in the ground. You'll find the trails better. But you got to, the biggest thing, like I think the first thing that I'm ever looking for on a property is the bedding area. Because that's where they spend the most time.
Security, and find where they feel safe.
Right, and that's where you got to know. Okay, that's the bedding area. That's where I got to be real careful getting around. That's probably my favorite places to hunt around, but you got to be super careful getting around them. But yeah, you find the bedding area, then you got to find the food source, and then there's going to be a trail from the bedding area to the food source. So that's just natural. So you see a lot of guys put corn out, food plots, whatever, and then they hunt right over that. They'll sit in the food plot or they'll sit on a corn pile and hunt. Any deer that comes out to an open, that corn pile, it's not natural. They know that. The food plot, you got to remember these deer live there 24/7, and when, all of a sudden it's dirt, and all of a sudden you've got this big nice clover patch coming up.
Yeah.
Like, what's going on here?
They might use it, but they're going to be edgy.
They're going to get nervous,
or
especially
at night.
At night times. But especially at the beginning, they're going to be real leery coming in. So if you're doing this later in the year, so like you're going out in the season saying, all right, I'll just carry a couple 100 pounds of corn, dump it. Those deer are going to see that. They might spook them, but if you get them. If you find their food source, whatever it is, I'm a big believer on cutting them off before they get to that, because they're not suspecting anything. When they get to a food source, that's when they start getting real careful, when they start looking around, especially if it's open. A bigger buck's going to stay back in the thick stuff, make sure everything else is secured before he comes out.
Might let some other deer go.
Exactly. You'll see the does, the young bucks come in, and they'll be out there. Then all of a sudden he might come out, maybe in daylight.
Yeah.
You got to learn the property that way with a food source bedding area. You got to learn the wind too.
Yeah.
Because that's probably your biggest, factor for, risking it.
And not just, and we made a huge point of this in those scouting videos. It's not just the wind where you're sitting.
Right.
It's what your approach.
Yeah. It's everything.
You can blow an otherwise good stand by walking to it the wrong way.
Oh yeah. Yeah. You can. That's the thing when you're finding a new place to put a stand. Like, this is a great spot for a stand. Well, how am I going to get to it?
How am I going to get?
We've got places like that, and it's like, man, this would be perfect. But it's how are we going to get to it? Like, I'm going to have to go through a bedding area to get to it. That's not going to work.
Right.
Yeah, or whatever it may be. So wherever you find this, place you want to put a stand or blind, you got to make sure you've got a good access point to get in there. And sometimes you're limited to what you can do. So I just think you should do the best you can. But I'm a big believer in, sneaking in, sneaking out, and you can, in the dark, you might be able to get away with a little more. I don't know how many times I've had deer walk parallel with me because they don't know what you are.
Yeah. And I know the answer to this, but our audience doesn't. So do you use a light, or you try to avoid using a light?
I don't use lights.
I don't either.
I used to in gun season when it was in certain areas that I hunted. There was a lot of cowboys around, a lot of questionable people.
And I probably would if I was on public land or something.
If I was on public land, I would at least flick a light every so often. Just
keep it pointed down though, because man, a light in the woods, I think that's going to make a deer, especially a mature buck, he's gonna know something's wrong.
I think so.
And he'll avoid that area that day.
I know guys who, some old timers that have killed some good bucks, and they're just like, they use a light for everything. Yeah. But sometimes you get away with it, sometimes you don't. To me, it's just another.
I try not.
It's a risk.
Yeah,
it's to me, it's a risk.
Yeah.
But sometimes you have to use one. Like you get tangled up in some stuff in the woods, like you've got to use one. Or I mean, you don't want to take a chance, and if it's a new property and you're not sure, like you don't want to get lost, you want to get turned around. I keep a light in my pack.
Yeah.
And that's for if I shoot one in the dark, and it's dark, it's dark on me, and I got to track it, whatever. But I do keep a light in there. I usually put batteries in it first of the year.
Yeah.
Never checked it since. But
now you brought up food plots. I mean, Casey and I have hunted together for a long, long time, and I remember your first food plots was, man, we were carrying rakes and shovels and hose into the woods. Like we'd take them a mile in and carve out a little area as big as this floor in front of us.
Yeah, we split secret spot down.
Throw something down. Yep. That's how it started.
Yeah, I mean, that's just...
Now it's a lot different now.
Oh, yeah, everything's different now. But yeah, it's used to... You just do what you can, do what you can afford.
Yeah.
That was a thing. Like it was called Secret Spot, and I don't remember the maker, if it was Whitetail Institute or...
Yeah, Secret Spot. I remember that name.
It was just a grass, and I was...
and it would work.
It would work. I had deer on it. I had, at that time, we would put it out. We take rakes. We take a sickle.
I remember doing that.
We'd carry all that stuff in, and we would rake out all the leaves, and we would kind of turn up the dirt a little bit, and we'd take that seed, put it down, and it would grow. And we would always have deer, and that's when I had the old 35 millimeter roll camera. And you'd be walking up to your stand, 6 o'clock in the morning, pitch black, and all of a sudden it looked like lightning went off because it was a flash on the camera.
Oh yeah, I remember those. But now,
that's how we started with it.
So nowadays with the food plot, what do you grow? What do you try to grow now?
I'm going back to all clover and chicory and nothing else.
Okay.
I've grown turnips, radishes. I mean, all your brassicas, but keep it simple.
Yeah.
Clover works.
They like
chicory.
clover.
I've gone through a lot of my old camera photos of up in that food plot, and clover's hardy. It can be grazed. They'll graze it, and I mow it too. I actually just mowed a buddy's yesterday. Clover's 13 and a half inches tall, and there's is amazing looking. But I like the clover, and I do like the chicory. I'll usually what I'll do is get everything planted, and the biggest problem is the weed control. That's your biggest problem with a lot of these food plots. If you can't just go out your back door and take care of it, you're gonna have some issues.
You're gonna be gone for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, and that's how we are. We've always had weed problems, and now I get glyphosate from farmers. That stuff that cancer causing stuff. I mean, I got probably 10 gallons out there in the barn of it now. I burn everything, fry everything before I plant, and then keep it at the clover because it's drought tolerant. We've been getting a lot of droughts. We had that last year.
Yeah,
we had the worst drought ever last year. Where I think I planted that food plot 3 times. And but yeah, I look for something that'll grow in your area. I've been using Domain, that company out of Wisconsin.
Okay.
There's several seed companies out of Wisconsin. Bucket Ready's another one, and then Horny Buck is another one. They're awesome to use. And the best thing with them is just call them and tell them, like, this is where I'm located at. This is my pH.
And they'll help you.
Oh yeah,
you'll talk to somebody in America that'll help
they talk to somebody right there, and it's all privately owned. They're not huge companies.
Okay.
They have
That's
hundreds of people.
Yeah.
And you're going to get put through to customer service, and you got somebody over in India answering. You just call them up, or I've talked to Domain on Instagram.
Yeah.
I'll ping them on Instagram some, and you want to get your facts with your dirt, so you want to get your pH sample. You can do nitrogen tests and all that.
You can do that yourself.
You can do all that yourself. They sell the kits. I mean, you don't have to get it from the seed company. Tractor Supply, Rural King, all those farm stores have it. Test your dirt so you know what you have. And then, we were, so new to food plots. Like, I'm not a farmer. I don't know this stuff. So it's trial and error. We made a lot of errors. And then you figure out what works. But then, you always want to get better. So eventually you start calling these people, like Domain. I'm like, hey man, this is where I'm located. This is my soil type. Here's an aerial view of the property. this is what I was planning on planning. And they were like, yeah, that'll work good. And I'm like, this is how I was planning on planning it was, tilling it, spraying it, whatever. And they were like, yeah, do that. Or they'll give you some advice on a better way to plant.
Yeah.
And they got, their seeds too, you don't need heavy equipment to plant these things. You can broadcast them. You can, it's throw and grow. And a lot of guys are frost seeding now. So you're putting your seeds out early spring, while the ground's still half frozen.
Yeah.
And then when it thaws, that ground's, you got a lot of moisture in it. It's thawing, the seeds coming down.
Kind of ready made.
And it works great.
Yeah.
So that's what, I'm doing that with chicory about every year over the clover, because I spray the clover so much through the summer to keep the grasses down, the weeds, that it kills my chicory. But it's good on the clover. Clover chokes everything out. And then when you overseed it with the chicory, later on it comes out.
Yeah.
And then you kill it again and you just keep redoing it.
Now, as far as, I know the answer, but I'm going to just ask. So tree stands or blinds or a mixture of both?
Both.
Okay.
Both.
You've kind of really just, we've known of blinds and used blinds and hunted from the ground our whole life, but you've kind of recently gotten more excited about blinds, haven't you?
Yeah. I've always been a tree stand guy. Yeah, I used to climbers, old lock-ons, what I grew up doing. Climbers, because I like to be mobile sometimes. And then anymore, like those ladder stands, as far as the safety aspect, those are probably the best.
That's what I've got my kids doing. I really don't want my kids doing what I've done.
No, I don't.
All the years, and what I continue to do.
Yeah,
I still.
Yeah, that's do as I say, not as I do type of thing.
But the ladder stands are great, but once they're known in the deer community, that can be a bit of a problem.
Yeah, and
if you got to move them, they're
tough to hang. So I've been using. I got single man and 2-man, because we take some kids out too, to try to get them their first deer, or sometimes a kid will just come out just to hang out up in the stand, show them deer. So in the spots, like I'd call them probably my not serious spots, like where you're just going to see deer. Yeah, I got the 2-man up. Yeah. But those 2-man, they are so heavy because a lot of them are double walled. Yeah, and then it's one thing. If it
takes 2 men to hang them.
It does. And now, if it weighed 350 pounds, I might pick that up. No problem. But
they're so tall.
They don't even weigh 300 pounds, and you can lift a lot more. But you've got a 20-foot ladder, because I'm all about being high up. You don't need to be high up in certain areas, but where I've got them, you need to be high up. Yeah. So I get 20 to 22-foot ladders on some of these, but all your weight's at the top. Yeah. So to stand them up, there's 2 ways to stand them up, in my opinion. One, you lay it at the base, swing it up like that. You got to have several guys for that, and sometimes you got to throw a rope over them to pull it. Yeah. But the best way for me is putting the top of the stand at the base of the tree, picking it up, slamming it against the tree, picking it up, slamming it against the tree. But once that weight goes up over 50% on the height, now you're top heavy. And if you miss that tree, pushing it against it, it's just going. It's going, They're tough to hang, but once you get them up and get them secured, they're not going anywhere. And you can put a kid in there, strap them in, and it's no problem.
Yeah, I've got a kid that really would not get in those lock-on stands. Yeah. I don't think they would do it. And to me, it's just normal. I'm not afraid of them at all. I can use the little rope steps, not a problem, or the little sticks, whatever. I don't care. But they don't mind the ladder. It just feels safe, it's secure. It feels like you got something under you. So I like ladder stands. Now, I am kind of laughing because I'm thinking about that ladder we put up that time. And it was a throwaway spot. Oh, yeah. I think a kid was going to come down.
Yeah, it was. That's exactly what it was.
And it was a throwaway spot. We hung it. I think we kind of laughed at it.
We did. We laughed. We literally laughed.
And then you ended up, I think you shot a pretty nice buck out of it. Yep. And you saw several nice bucks.
Yeah.
And then we quit laughing.
Yeah. So that was, I remember I was like, well, I got this 2-man, and it was a short, I still have that 2-man. It's actually down. It's still down there. I've killed a lot of deer out of that stand. Yeah. It's not tall. I honestly think it's missing a section of ladder. Yeah. And I mean, it's like 10 foot, like 12, maybe 12 foot
Yeah.
off the
It was
ground.
just for bringing some kid
It's,
down, I
it's
think.
exactly why we said it. Cause we're like, all right, let's
We
set it.
need something.
Yeah,
So
we got a kid coming down tomorrow. So let's just put this stand up. They're going to see deer right here. It'll get them interested in it because it's the kid's young enough. They're not going to hunt it there, but if you're not showing a kid deer or whatever,
yeah.
they're not interested. You're going to
Right.
burn them out. So we're like,
Yeah.
let's just put them up
Be
here.
real careful how you do brand new hunters.
Yeah, that's a
because
delicate
yeah.
thing. But yeah, we went down there, put the stand together. We're like, all right, this tree here looks like a good spot. You probably won't get seen here, but you can see everything. So we slapped it up, missing a section of ladder, and we got out of the stand, walked away, and looked back at it. We just laughed, and we were like, well, it'd be good for a kid.
Yeah.
And that was it. And then that same night, because you had to leave.
Yeah.
You helped me hang it that same night.
I think I was bringing the kid down like the next day or something.
Yeah. So, and I was down there camping. So I was like, all right. I looked at the time, like it's a little too late to go to the spots I want to hunt tonight. So I was like, I'll just sit in this stand.
Yeah.
So I just grabbed my bow, went back up, hung out up there, and ended up seeing a real nice 10-pointer come through.
I remember that.
And then the kid was there. So through the week, I mean, I saw 3 deer, 3 bucks.
Yeah.
And I should have had all of them, honestly. Well, I should have 2 of them. But there was one, he was wide, he's probably 21-inch inside spread with a doe. It was a thin horn rack, but he just a big body. He came in with the doe, but he wouldn't follow her across like I thought he would.
Mm-hmm.
And he ended up leaving. She left. She didn't want any part of him. It was still early, but he was a stud buck. And then the next morning, it was right at sunlight. I'm just sitting up there, and I heard the steps coming through the woods and the leaves crunching. I'm like, usually I don't see the bucks till about 8:15. And I'm like, it's got to be a doe. So I'm sitting there anyways. And then I hear a grunt. I'm like, here we go. And I look, and it was just this massive 9-point I'd never seen before. And he was actually 2 yards from the stand at one point, but there was a lot of thick stuff up in the trees. And you can't shoot behind, but you can shoot in front and to the sides. He actually hit a licking branch that was hanging off the tree I was in. And being that stand was so short, when he stood up, he's 6 foot tall, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he was like right there. I'm like looking at him. And I was like, I'm going to kill this deer. And he actually cut my scent where I cut across to it. But yeah, it was a joke of a stand, but it turned out to be a hot
that happens every once in a while.
Yeah.
Sometimes we find things by accident.
Yeah.
What you think's going to work doesn't, and what you don't think's going to work sometimes does. Now, when you're setting a stand or a blind location, we already talked about this, but usually you're trying to intercept them between bedding and feeding. If you were going to cheat one way or the other toward the feeding or toward the bedding, what do you favor in your setup, or is it just always different?
It's always different because it depends on the property. So depends on how big, what kind of deer you got, the bedding area.
But would you agree that's generally how most deer get killed, somewhere in between those two zones?
Yeah, I think your bigger bucks get killed that way.
Yeah.
I think probably more deer get killed over food because more people hunt that way.
Well, that is true. Yeah.
And I don't think that many deer are getting killed in the bedding areas because I don't think people are hunting in the bedding areas that much. I mean, if you're after it, particularly about you're in
if they are, they're probably not seeing anything.
Yeah.
Because you got to hunt those exactly right.
There's a certain way to hunt those. But if I had to pick, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what I would do. I think I'll just have to see what was going on.
Yeah. Kind of an unanswerable question
Yeah.
without the exact scenario.
Yeah. Everything's different.
Now, what about mornings or evenings? Do you have a favorite?
I like mornings better, but honestly, I think I've killed more deer in the evenings.
That's going to be my next question. Do you have any idea which you've shot more of?
I think more in the evenings. I'd have to go through and figure it out. But it was always, since I was a kid, I like the mornings because I always like getting out in the woods in the dark and then watching the sun come up. And then usually when I first started deer hunting, I didn't start bow hunting until I was 13. But so it was gun season. I hunted gun for 3 years first. And, I would just go on that weekend and, we'd pack in, pitch black, cold. And that's when, the leaves are, frozen.
Yeah.
And then you could, it'd be pitch black, sun comes up, and then all of a sudden you just start hearing the deer walking on leaves. That was always my favorite. I think the early season, your evenings are better. And I think when you start, the colder it gets, I think the mornings are really good.
Yeah. That's kind of been my observation. Early in the season, evenings seem to be good. They're a little more on their summer pattern.
Yeah.
If it's early.
Yeah.
Now they leave that pattern pretty quick. But most of the success I've had, I think, has been more in the mornings or around the middle of November. But I mean, both are worth hunting.
Oh, you got to hunt both. I mean, I know, guys, you hunt what you can. If you can only hunt the evenings, hunt the evenings.
Yeah.
You can only hunt the mornings, just hunt what you can. But, also if you can, when it's prime time of the season, the rut, I'd hunt all day.
Yeah.
So that afternoon, you can kill. You'll get your bigger deer probably going to move that late morning to early afternoon time frame. You're not going to catch them on the feeding spots. You could, but you're going to catch them in the thick, the bedding areas. They're going to be moving through scent checking the doe beds.
Yeah. So now, do rubs and scrapes play a big role in how you decide where to hang a stand, or do you just need them to be somewhere around?
I really just need to be around.
Because I know some guys, and I don't necessarily think this is a good idea. They see a big rub, get all excited and put a stand up.
Yeah.
See a big scrape, get all excited and put a stand up. I want them around,
right?
But I'm not necessarily setting up on them. What's your thought?
Well, so I mean, when I see the rubs and the scrapes, I mean, I'll hunt around them if it's new and I've never hunted that part of the whatever. Everything's new to me, but if I'm seeing a heavy rub line from one deer and it looks like a pretty good one, I'm not going to hunt the actual rub line. I'm going to figure out, okay, the rub line, that's his path.
Yeah. You can kind of get his trajectory.
Yeah. Where's he going from there? Like, I'll hunt around him. I'm not going to sit over top of him. But anytime I see a big rub, I get excited.
Yeah.
Rule of thumb, bigger the rub, bigger the deer, but the smaller the rub, not always the smaller the deer. Yeah. I've seen some big deer rubbing some small trees.
Big deer will rub small trees, but a small one won't necessarily rub a big
tree. And if he does, he's not going to tear it up.
Yeah.
So you can look at a rub, like guys will see rubs, and I like when I see a rub, like I'll fully look at it. I'll get right up on it.
Study it. Yeah.
You can see the tine, the depth of the tine and the width. So, I mean, then if it's high up, if the rub goes up real high, I figure, there's just a lot of stuff play factors, but I don't necessarily hunt directly over the rubs and the scrapes. Usually I have stands that are set up and they're rubbing and scraping around them anyways.
Yeah. So, I wanted to ask you about you tend to be at this point in your hunting career. It hadn't always been this way, but you tend to kind of go into a season fairly certain about some of the bucks you've got. How do you, what are your thoughts on hunting a particular buck? Is that the way you approach it, or is it sometimes yes, sometimes no, or what?
Well, it depends. So I like to go into season hunting after one buck, but the first thing is you got to find that buck.
Yeah. Is this a camera thing?
Camera. So there's a whole process. Like, everybody's got their own way to do things. I'll take, the summer months. Like, I got a couple cameras up right now, actually, just to keep tabs on stuff.
And it's May, by the way.
Yeah, it's every third week of May. But I got some cameras up. I like to see what's going on. But there's some, you see a buck on now, you don't know what it is. It's just little stubbies. Or,
I have no idea if he'll be there.
You have no clue.
Yeah.
But once the end of June rolls around, you're gonna start seeing what's really there.
So you can kind of get your inventory.
Yeah, and then usually I try to have it in my head where 4th of July week.
Okay.
That's when I want to get my cameras out, start putting them out, and I don't put them all out.
You're getting more serious.
Yeah, I put them over my main spot. I put them over like where they feed at, where the main travel paths are, not in the thickets where I try to hunt the big bucks, right? But just kind of in general area where you're going to see just deer in general. I'll never put out every camera at once. I like to hold them back in case I find something. But there's been several years where, this one buck, he was just a mainframe, just an 8-pointer. We had him on camera for 4 years.
Hmm.
And he was one that his tips almost touched at the end of the beams. Yeah. And it's probably a half-inch gap. In the third year, I think Dad wanted to shoot him, and I was like, I don't know. I was like, let's give him another year. Like, I think one more year, man, because he just kept putting signs on him. Like, let's give him one more year. And then the last year he was on camera, he was a monster. I mean, he was a tank, and the neighbor ended up killing him.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, I mean, he was a tank. I mean, I've got a picture of him with a 150-inch 10, and he dwarfed that deer.
Yeah.
Body and antlers.
The area, we hunted the same property that year, just vastly different parts of it.
Yeah.
I had a really wide 10 that year.
Yeah.
And the neighbor you're talking about, he had a partner.
Yeah, his
partner shot the one I was after. Their property bordered ours, and probably the 2 best bucks we had on camera that year. Both of them got killed by neighbors.
They were,
and that happens sometimes.
That's just part of it. I mean, you hear a lot of people say, my deer. You don't know those deer. Like, those deer living on your property. They want. Yeah, it's
you're not high fencing it, and we don't.
Yeah, exactly. It's just, you gotta kill them before your neighbor does, and that deer's going to do whatever that deer wants to do.
Yeah.
But usually going into the season, I don't really have for the majority of the times, I don't have many big deer like that I found in the summer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find them for buddies all the time.
Because things change.
Right. Everything changes. And, that comes back to, there's 100 different things that play into it. But that also comes down to property management, because when the fall patterns change, the deer are looking for other things. And then you got the rut coming in.
Mm-hmm.
So when the rut comes in, the bucks are looking for does. That's all they care about.
Yeah.
Well, if they're the property they're coming from, summertime, they're hanging out sometimes in a bachelor group, big ones, not always, but they're secluded. They're by themselves. They want to be left alone. Well, then when the rut starts getting close, now they want to go find the does. We don't shoot does. We don't do that 1-to-1 ratio or whatever. We just leave them alone. Because the neighbors shoot them. So I'm not going to go out and shoot 2 or 3 does a year. The neighbors are all shooting them. So keep the does there. The bucks are going to find them.
The less death you can have on your property, the more relaxed those deer
exactly.
Are gonna be.
Keep the deer in the most relaxed state.
You keep shooting them, ones that you're really not after.
Yep.
You're going to panic.
Yeah,
deer population.
Right.
They will feel less relaxed.
Right. Hunt them in their natural state. Leave them if they're relaxed. They'll
I'm not against shooting does, but if you don't need to, and you're hunting a mature buck, the fewer incidents of death you can have around your food plot, around your bedding area, that's going to be better.
Yeah, just leave them. I just leave them alone, and because at the end of the day, the more does you have, that's just the more scent you got in there. Now you're gonna have guys argue, well, you're not going to see the bucks because you got too many does and they're just getting with does and staying in the bedding area. I mean, I don't believe in that 100% either, because these bucks, they're getting with does or leaving the does. They're getting with other ones. They're always moving.
Yeah.
So that's why going into season, maybe I don't have a good buck that I'm after yet. I'm just like, well, we'll just let my cameras do my scouting for me then, and one will show up, and if they don't, whatever, they just hang out till one does and go through the season. And if nothing shows up, it is what it is. Just go to the next season looking for one.
Now, I've always thought if a guy's hunting public and that's just what he has to do, my advice would be, you need to know what's going on in real time right when the season opens, and try to get your buck quick.
I think
before people are interested, while they're still in summer mode. Try to get your buck quick. But if you're you hunt private, so what's your approach to the beginning of the season? Like, are you out there opening day of bow season?
No,
I'm normally not.
I have before, but it's so hot. Like, we got so many ticks, which, we'll spray it off with ticks, but that's just something else you're spraying in the woods. But I mean, if I don't have a particular deer that I'm after, I'm not going to go out there and because, there was one, I hunted one time opening day and it was 97 degrees.
Oh, really?
And that's in the Midwest. This isn't Alabama or Florida. This is the Midwest. And I'm like, I got up on that climber, went up that tree, and I'm like, I'm not doing this anymore. And then, you see you're that hot, your thermals are everywhere. And if you do kill one, you got to get it out like right then, or you're going to spoil the meat.
Yeah.
And so, the way I go into the season is, okay, I don't really have a buck I'm targeting right now. So I'll just stay out because, the more you go into the woods and your hunt spot, the more scent you're getting, the more you're educating.
You're leaving a footprint.
Right. So you're just going to educate them. So just, if there's nothing there and, I got plenty of other stuff I can do, that time of year.
Yeah.
I'll watch the cameras. I'll make sure everything's okay. I'll just leave it alone. And then, those deer will slowly start getting into their fall patterns where they're going out, you can figure them out quick then. And then as the temperatures drop, you start seeing more activity. October rolls around, middle of October, you might see a rub, a scrape. And then, it's at that point, you don't know what's going to show up.
Mm-hmm.
So you can, first few weeks of the season, it's just a toss up. Once you get into that middle of October, third week of October, it could be any day. You could have a giant show up because that's when they start to open up their area.
Mm-hmm.
They start to move. They start to come out. And there could have been a buck on your property you didn't even know about too.
Yeah.
Or the neighbors could have been hiding something.
We found sheds that we never got camera pictures.
That's
for.
Exactly. So that's,
you think everything with these cameras,
right?
And you really don't.
You don't. It depends on how many cameras you put out. A lot of guys might have 2, 3, 4,
and how big the property is.
Exactly, and how thick it is. So if you can, I don't know what the average hunter has for cameras. Let's say it's 5 to 10. Which is a lot of cameras to manage.
Mm-hmm.
That's, batteries, and if before the cell cams, you had to have double SD
You'd be
cards.
on the ground. Yeah.
Double SD cards. And then that's what I would do anyways. I would never pull an SD card, go check it and then put it back in later.
Yeah.
I always would pull that SD card and put a new one in. That way I can take photos it's 24/7.
Yeah.
I always had extra batteries. But if one thing I've learned with the cameras, I can put a camera on a tree and face it north, right there, right on a trail that I think, all right, we're going to get some deer here, and you'll get deer there. And then you don't realize it, but there's more deer going behind that camera.
Yeah.
There's another trail there. So, you can put the cameras out and they're great for scouting, but they're not going to get everything.
Yeah.
And you got to know that too, because you can find sign. Like guys will say, man, I don't have anything good on cameras, but I found a big set of tracks. I found some big rubs.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a sign that there's probably pretty good deer.
Yeah.
But just because he's not on camera doesn't mean he's not there.
Yeah, that's right.
So you can't just always go what's on. The camera's not going to lie either. But if something's not
if he's
there,
on camera, he's
if
there.
he's on camera, 100% he's there. If there's not one on camera, that still doesn't mean they're not there.
Yeah.
So you got to take that into consideration. I'm a big fan. I run a lot of cameras now, but I also have my main cameras that I monitor through the season. Batteries are about to die, I change them. But I've also got cameras deep in the thickets I put out right before the season, and when they die, they die.
Yeah.
It is what I'm not going to go in there and change.
Whatever it gets, it gets.
Whatever it gets, it gets. Because that's it tells me what's there, where I'm not accessing, because I don't want to spook stuff.
Yeah.
But also it tells you if somebody's slipping in on your property, which we don't have an issue with anymore. But I do like having a lot of cameras out because sitting at the house, I like to scroll through and look at all the pictures.
Yeah. Well, it's made things a lot better. I think the cameras are a good thing.
I do too. That's a game changer.
But they don't. It's cameras don't guarantee mature bucks for guys year after year.
No,
you still got to be able to hunt them.
You got to have them on your property. Like that's phase one. Is you can go to 100 acres somewhere. Have it all to yourself, and you just might not have one.
Yeah.
Now, it's not going to say you're never going to have one, because you can for sure, if you manage your property, you'll have them.
Yeah.
But you're just starting square one now. So genetics are playing a big thing. There's a lot of things that come into play, but if you get a property and it's a long term, it's not like you bought it, you own it, or, maybe you're leasing it, or maybe it's a buddy's place. He's like, yeah, you can hunt anytime you want.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't get discouraged saying, man, there's no big bucks in here. Who cares? Make your own big bucks. Like maybe, if you can plant a food plot, plant the food plot, bait, whatever you got to do
Yeah.
just to keep the deer there. Maybe don't
Yeah.
even hunt them. Just leave the property alone.
Well, yeah, if you want those big, smart, mature bucks that are almost like a different species, you might have to quit killing stuff for a little while.
Exactly.
Let them
Right.
get comfortable where
Right.
they're at. Almost create a little sanctuary.
Yeah.
And then boom.
Right.
When they least expect it.
Exactly. Because, you hear guys get, you talk to guys that are hunting, like, hey, you see anything today? And they're like, just a little basket rack, a little 10-pointer. A lot of times you hear guys say, just a small 130-inch deer. I mean, if a lot of people don't know what real 130-inch deer look like either.
Yeah.
But, guys are seeing like young deer and they get discouraged over it. Well, that's the future.
Yeah.
So that's, I like seeing,
keep
deer,
him calm and keep him here.
Right.
Keep him alive.
Exactly.
He'll be better next year.
Exactly. Because you'll see deer at different ages. You'll see your spikes. You see your button bucks.
Yeah.
You got your little basket 6.
That's a sign of a good property.
Right. You 6, your little 8s, your 10s. And then now you're getting a 3.5-year-old deer. And then the 4s, they're looking real good at 4.
They start getting tempting.
Very tempting. And, it's one of those things, like you got a whole, not just antler size, but look at your age, the age gap on everything. Like you've got them on all categories.
Yeah.
So that, if you do happen to kill, if that's what you're after, an old mature buck, well, now if that one survives, now he's taking over next year. Then you also got the thing, other deer pushing in.
Yeah. And something else I've learned too is when the old monarch buck does get shot, it's not a time to say, well, it's over. The big boy got killed, because he was probably keeping other big boys away.
He was keeping others out.
And so when he's gone, somebody's going to take his spot.
Yeah, for sure.
And so, that's another thing just to think about. When a big one gets shot, it's not a reason to pack up.
Right.
Because he was keeping other bucks away.
Oh yeah. He'll keep other bucks.
You're not, especially in the rut, you're not just going to have 10 king bucks.
No,
it's just not, unless you're just paying a hunt behind a high fence.
Right. Or you just have a massive amount of property.
Yeah.
But, I mean, on for the everyday blue collar guy, their hunting ground, you're not going to have just tons of monster deer.
You're going to have
you get a few run through there.
Bucks.
Yeah, you'll definitely get a few coming through if you're, if you got a great spot.
Yeah.
But if, once you do kill, the big one, whatever you're calling it, the most dominant buck in there, he's out, chances are that next year you're going to have one more take his throne. And usually that big one probably has the best bedding spot on the property. They have and so they're going to come in. So as long as you keep your property managed, like you're not overkilling, you kill some does, whatever, you got kids coming down there. If you got the deer numbers, like they're, I wouldn't deny a kid a deer, in my personal opinion, just to keep them interested, if you want them to keep sticking with hunting. But, you can hunt, you got to have fun through the year too. Like
what I've always tried to do, I got 3 kids, 2 of them hunt.
Yeah.
I've always tried to kind of have them a spot.
Yeah.
Where they could get a deer.
Yeah.
But they're not necessarily going to ruin what I'm doing.
Exactly.
Because I usually have a whole other agenda.
Because they don't have the patience they don't have the time.
Yeah, I've got my agenda.
Right.
Then I got an agenda for them. I want them to get some action.
You got to show them deer to keep them excited, and then hopefully get one.
And I know not everybody can do that, but if you can, it's a great approach.
Right. Be able to do that. Yeah. So that's.
But anybody that's really serious about hunting, they're going to have a couple spots.
Yeah, you can't just have one, because I mean, you might have your one main spot, but and if you only have one spot, you can't hunt it every single day of the season, because your weather, your wind. So you can only hunt it on a certain wind. Another thing people can think about doing is, if you like this, you only hunt one spot. Well, you don't need just one stand or one blind. You can put multiples in one area and set them up for different winds.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that, and then also for some of these deer, if you're hunting over a food source or whatever, they're going to come in downwind most times.
Right.
So they're going to come in, sniffing. So, if you got wind coming out of the north blowing towards the south, that deer is probably going to be coming in from the south. And if you're on the north side of him, he's going to smell you. But if you put another stand and set it way back farther down his trail, but like off to the side or something, you take a chance. You might be able to get a shot at him, get behind him somehow. And I mean, you can hunt one spot from multiple stands.
Yeah.
Then look at the deer at a different angle to try to pass off. But you also should follow that. If you know the trail he's on, you should scout that to see where's he getting on this trail from. You can set up there.
Yeah.
That's where cameras come into play.
Yeah. And a lot of that, I'll do a lot of that in the off season. And then you're always scouting, even when you're hunting. And if you find it in the hunting season, you find something worth hunting, I'd hunt it right away.
Yeah, for sure.
I'd get on it.
Fresh sign, I would. Yeah, it's always
that's
good.
Something your dad's always told me.
Yeah, that's what we did.
You find hot sign in the season.
Yeah,
don't wait,
because things change, and especially when that rut happens. I mean, the new bucks coming in, got deer shifting over to a different side of the property. They might just they might be hugging one side more.
Yeah.
We like to keep an extra stand, like just a lot. We like to keep a couple lock-ons because they don't take up much room in the truck or at the camp. And then if you do find it, go throw that stand up. But that's why it comes back what I was saying earlier about the cameras.
Yeah.
I never put all my cameras out at once. And they might all be out like towards the end of the season, but I usually put out 80% of my cameras, before the season, going into the season, early season, right around that time. But I've always got 4 or 5 cameras not in the woods,
based on what you're seeing. What you want to
exactly.
What you want to see more of.
Because if you find, you can be walking to a stand and all of a sudden you just find some hot sign. It's like, man, what's going on here?
Mm-hmm.
Let me slap a camera up. That's why I always keep one camera in my pack.
Yeah.
For that reason. And then, also what I started doing, I had to do it last year on this one deer, but he kept coming into through this one spot off this ridge, and I'm like, man, where's he coming from? I know he's coming from up top, but where at up top? So I started looking. Is he coming in from top left or top right? So I had this camera out, and finally I got a picture of him in the background. It's always at night. I think there was a doe or a smaller buck coming through, but you could see him in the back, and he was coming from the left. So I'm like, all right. So now he's coming from this direction to get to my stand. So instead of thinking over here, I got another camera and I stuck it on a trail up there to the left. I found a couple trails. I stuck it on one, and it's like, all right, he's not on this trail. He's on another one. So I moved it to another trail and finally picked him up. So you can take another camera. You can have your main camera in your centralized spot, wherever it may be, but then you can take another camera if you have one, put it farther down the trail to verify he's coming from a certain area, or verify he's not coming from that area, because these deer will make loops all the time, or they're tricking you.
Yeah.
So if it's like, is he coming from the left or the right? Because there's you might have 30 trails up there, whatever it is, but you eventually can pinpoint what trail you can eventually track him back.
Yeah.
And then you can get a stand or whatever.
Yeah.
And cut him off.
Yeah, that's pretty slick right there. That's smart. That's a smart way to approach it. Well, I tell you what, we'll end it there for today.
Yeah.
But it's only May right now, so we've got it'll come up fast. I mean, the time to start thinking about next season is already here. But we'll get Casey back on the channel as it gets a little bit closer, and we'll have some stuff on scouting, tree stands, blinds, all that kind of stuff. And maybe some fun stuff like guns, bows, things like that.
Yeah, we definitely do.
So, but anyway, thanks for being
no
on
problem.
today. Appreciate it. This has been really, really good. I guarantee you this will help somebody that's just trying to figure out what to do.
Hopefully, hopefully somebody.
Me and you have been there. I've not known what to do more than I want to admit.
I learned the hard way.
Yeah,
that's always been my way.
If this can help somebody, then great.
Yeah. If they got any other questions too, just whatever. If they want to reach out to you,
hit us up in the comments. If you've got if you're finding this channel helpful, make sure you like, follow, subscribe, turn on notifications and stuff. Don't be afraid to hit us up in the comments if you got something you'd like to see or hear about. We can look into that, try to do it. Well, thanks for joining us today. I hope this has been a help to you in some way. I'm Matt. This is Casey, and it's been good being with you today. And that's how we see it from our stand.
Thank you for listening today. Be sure to tell your buddies and follow us on your favorite podcasting platforms. Y'all take care.